Here we are for the part 2. By mistake, I pressed stop. I pressed stop by mistake, and it flipped, and I didn't continue recording. But this is where I ended, of course, because on the strike for the CSN or the STM, and I checked that this is made in Quebec, Canada. I got a Canada tatted up, and of course it's 100% recyclable, and it's made in Quebec. So see that they're on strike. So I said I support their strike generally because the workers are asking for 25%. Which over 5 years, so divided over 5, that's 5% annually. And see how cool this is? Made in Quebec, recycled, 100% recyclable, and it's recycled material, and it's made in Quebec. So they're on strike, so on strike. I kind of support them. Of course, my ideas, theories, protocols for the creation of the Imperial Democratic Republic of the 63 always. And of course for the NACWP, let's get it rocking with that PPP, Public-Private Partnership, and the Phoenix People's Party. Together, pledge allegiance to our family, and the NACWP. And of course, the NACWP, North American Collective Workers' Party, is fundamentally the PPP, Phoenix People's Party, and is fundamentally for the Imperial Democratic Republic, a Democratic Republican People's Imperial Project. But then, generally, as a universal revolutionary centrist, I'm in deep support of their strike action because they're asking for 25% over the 5 years. So 25% divided by 5 is 5% annually. But keeping in mind that even myself in the past summer I used 4 tickets and I paid a quarter more for each ticket than last year because it went up from this year, the price for the tickets, because that strike is related to the STM, the Société de Transport de Montréal, which includes all the public transport of the island, of the Hawk Island, Montreal, of Montreal, the big metropolis city which I reside in this life and in a parallel life. And of course it is about 2.5 million people just on the island, and more than 1 million commute with the public transit. So in theory, I don't see why the mathematical financial feasibility is not able to be done for 25% over 5 years. That means that 25% divided by 5, that's 5% annually. And of course the prices of tickets have increased by a quarter. So I paid for those 4 tickets a quarter more each. That's $1 more. So a quarter from $3.50, 25 cents, that is of course a percentage which is the increase, right? So it comes out to about 8% increase, right? But it accumulates because it was so for the past years. Every year the price has increased. It went from $3.25 to $3.75. So if we calculate that, $3.75 to $3.25, that is of course, the calculation is of course plural. Of course that is whatever combination is of 50 cents. So then we see that it is closer, of course, when we calculate it that way, that is more in actuality over the past 2-3 years. In actuality is more than about 25% or plus, even 30 and 40% when we calculate it that way over the past 4 years. And they're asking for 25% over 5 years, the union. So that's divided by 5 is 5% every year. So 5 to get to 25. So of course I believe that financially, theoretically, it should be possible. Their offer on the table is to give them 12.5%, which is basically half, because 25 minus 12.5 is 12.5. So they're putting on the table, the bosses, the leaders, half of what they're requiring. They're asking for half. That's what they're asking for, 25%. So they're given half. But with the cost of living, in the first video I was just calculating, the fact that of course since February 2020 gas has increased about 75%, and this car and that car and that car that comes there and that car in the back, all these 4 cars going east and west all have a constant, mathematical constant, and the mathematical constant is that per 100 kilometers they always consume the same amount. It could be 11, 12, 13, 14 liters per 100 kilometers. You can do the conversion to gallons because a gallon is 4 liters, and you can do of course the conversion from kilometers into miles. It is the same financially. And of course the fact that the gas has increased by about 75% in the past 5 years, that means that per $100 spent, it's $75 more. So if you spent in 2020 February per gas $100, now if you have the same routes, if you didn't reduce, what you are averaging, the amount is 175. So for example, this car, if the personal driver still commutes the same, let's say about 300 kilometers weekly. That means that in February 2020 it paid $9.30 to fill up the gas if the consumption was 10 liters. If it's more, it's more, but let's say 10 liters, right, per 100 kilometers. That means that it's $9.30. So that means times 3 is $27.90, almost 28. But now it's no longer that today. And the last month average was 163 cents, or $1.63, which is the equivalent exactly to $16.30 for 100 kilometers. And times 3 is, yeah, it adds up, see? It adds up to 48.9, almost 49. So you go from almost 28 to 49, about more than $20. If it's the same routes, if it's the same distances, weekly distances that car goes. I said a number like that, but that's because it's a variable. But of course the distance can vary, but certain people, they have to commute to work, and they kind of have that routine, 9 to 5. You have that routine that you kind of have that average gas consumption the same as you had in 2018, 2019, and 2020 as you have today. That means that you average spend more, 75%. So basically the translation in words, pragmatic translation, is that you pay more, 75% more for every dollar that you spend. You spend now about $1.75 that you used to spend. So that is sucking from the wealth, so that you are unable to spend that money on other goods such as bacon, cheese, lettuce, rent. It's a big problem. You do that mathematics, financial mathematics, and my paradox is that I am financially stressed. You know, I am financial. That's my only stress, financial. But I got company. You know, thank you to my anonymous friend, you know, who give me this company, the line I have to wash. Gotta wash, and you know, I'm pretty grateful. I got donated in the first part of this September 28th, first Sunday of autumn. Of course, is the first Sunday of autumn. So I got a little bit of that rock and roll. Got some donated all that 3 black bananas, but I love them black. You know, I don't mind. I eat black bananas, and you know, sometimes I even have videos. You see me eating them. Hey, look at that! The white fluff going on the street. That was a good omen, I guess. Black and white and rainbow, 24/7, androgynous, pansexual, Aspie artist, athlete, philosopher. And doing a little bit of workout Sunday. I was a bit moody, but now I'm about 2 hours in my march, and I'm no longer moody, you know. And I've been depressed, I've been suicidal. It hasn't been easy for myself with my Asperger's, you know, living on the spectrum, and I have HFA, high functioning autism. Look at that beautiful tree. So it's always has been tough a journey, and it is more difficult for us people who are neurodivergent in such a way. And this is an eco center there. I love that white and red, they go together. Eco center. Here's where with the DGA we got to work with that DGA, and you can get all information. And what can you drop there? You can maybe drop some things if you have things that you have to do recycle properly, or if you have certain batteries maybe they take electronics. So this is, I guess, where we're gonna bring the electronics, but you have to do it. We have to do it as individuals. It's closed Sundays and Monday. That's French is closed, but of course you have different schedules for summer and winter. Winter starts October 15th, so now it's the same. So it's open every day from 8 to 6, every day, even Sundays. Only it's closed during the winter, from 15th of October to 14th of April. So basically it's open Sundays from 8 to 16, right? Because this is French. So just to clarify that, you have 2 schedules. The schedule for this is French for summer, and this is French for winter. So from 15th of October to 14th of April, and then the summer from 15th of April to 14th of October, open every day. But during winter, Sunday, which is understandable, and Monday it's closed. So here's what we got, Eco Center. And here you have, this would be needs a translation, but Eco-centers. Eco-centers. Coordonnées, Acadie. So this is what it takes. So you have the regulations. So you have liquids, potential gas, batteries, aerosol. Yeah, this is very good to have. So I think I'm gonna come here from now on because I love the red and the white. Gonna give them a call and see what I can bring. Although I have that smaller one there, but they're related because they're all related, all of the eco centers. So I guess this is where one of the main hubs in. And yeah, that's so cool. What's the phone number? 514-872-0384. 514-872-0384. 514-872-0384. 514-872-0384. Priestess of the goddess credit some kisses, and you need the DGA, you know, dancing goddess army, and you gotta salute, you know, it's a lot of work. And all for the environment as a democratic Republican, pro-labor, and love universal. Revolutionary centrist is not all about Wall Street. And the priestess always kisses in the name of the goddess, GODDSS. It's always God bless, goddess kiss. And we gotta get that dress. See, this one has to be recycled. Has to be recycled. Ah, there's work to be done, see? Yeah. Work to be done. And I'm all about work, you know, with my happiness and being androgynous pansexual, part of the LGBTQ community as well as neurodivergent community. It hasn't been easy, and you know, I love this beautiful sunset, and I gotta be grateful, thankful. My rent's paid, electricity bill's paid. Now I have a deadline September 30th to pay some of my phone. I estimate that I'm gonna be able to pay $11, and that means 4 days later I'm gonna pay another some dollars. When I get some money, I guess I'm gonna not get much. I'm gonna have to survive October with $870, eh? And so that's gonna be problematic. And my only stress now is really financial, you know. I had many jobs during COVID. I had many jobs, employments, but it lasted a few months, 4 months, and 3 months, and a few days, few weeks. I suppose that's the main problem, one of the main problems for people who are neurodivergent. Among some blessings that we have, or the curse of autism, high functioning Asperger's, is that it's a very high unemployment rate, say, for people of my community, which we are a tiny small minority, eh? It's less than 1%, eh? It's about 0.44%, although only half are diagnosed officially. Myself, I'm semi-officially diagnosed. And for years, since about more than 9 years ago, I've been diagnosed by several citizens who have told me, you know, you have autism, HFA, high-functioning autism, and you're an Asperger's, and you have this neurodivergence. That's why you can't keep friends too much. That's why you speak in a certain way, and you have these obsessive ritual-like routines, and you have also these obsessive-like routines with which you live, and of course you document in the lifestyle that you live, which makes you more difficult to sometimes understand and prone to misunderstanding and abuse and all the XYZ which comes with neurodivergence and being part, of course, of the neurodivergent community. And it's rare that I see 4. See 1, 2, 3, 4. We have voting here. Usually it's 2, hey, 2 or 1. It's kind of more rare. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have voting on the 2nd of November. People are voting for municipal elections here in the Hawk Island. Montreal is a big island, eh? We're surrounded by a big river, and it's a metropolis. Second most populated in Canada. It was the biggest for a few hundred years, and until it was dethroned by Toronto a few years ago. I think about 10 years ago, 2007, 2010, 2012, 2015. Gotta double check. But in the 21st century, in the 20th century, 1918, Montreal was the biggest. And as a neurotypical who might misunderstand me as a neurodivergent, we have to build bridges, brothers and sisters who are neurotypicals. You're the 99%, the vast majority of the population. We have to build small bridges, or big bridges, or large bridges, or extra large. Whether we build small, medium, large, or extra large, within those 4 categories of sizes, we might have a little bit of details to add, but generally, just like you order a coffee or fries, you might order fast food fries, and you might say, I want a large fry, I want a small fry, I want a medium fry, and I want an extra large. For family, 2 children, maybe that's what you order. Or you order a small cup of coffee, maybe, and a large extra large fry. So within those 4 categories, we gotta build small. We can build small bridges, medium-sized bridges, large bridges, or extra large bridges. But we have to build bridges because I don't have antagonistic negative relations vis-a-vis you, the neurotypicals. It's just that it has been a hard, tough road of accepting it myself, because since about end of 2015, early 2016, I've been told and diagnosed, you have, as citizens who have experience in the healthcare system and have worked with people who are autistic and who are neurodivergent and who are on the spectrum, by citizens who have lived with autism and being on the spectrum, and by citizens who have that experience with neurodivergence and people with Asperger's and autism and Aspies, and have that experience, so that I've been semi-officially, I say, diagnosed, because the moon is getting full. I wonder when the full moon is October, then in November we got the Scorpio full moon. So yeah, it's been a tough road, and only about 3.5 years ago during COVID, I finally accepted it, because I'm going to give a shout out, thank you again, to my anonymous friend who gifted me 2 books on autism, which have some chapters on Asperger's, and 1 book which was loaned 4 times from the library, because it was a library loan. It's called Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome, that has made me learn, beautiful red, about my condition, which is not a disease, and how, because of my condition, sometimes I'm prone to misunderstanding. And News on Show, I hope they still do. Now hiring, I'm gonna give them, I already did like 2 years ago, but I didn't get a follow-up. Info, Leavitz, Reception, 514-367-1654. I'm gonna write them tonight or tomorrow morning and say that I'm interested, but that I have Asperger's, and so sometimes beautiful pink ones, pink lemonade, aren't they so cute? Don't you just so cute, so cute, so cute. Flowers as I shoot, rock and roll. So it's not a disease, it's not an illness. It's just our brains processes information differently, and where we have difficulties in, social understanding, communication, we communicate differently. So our communication is sometimes bizarre. Seemingly bizarre, but it's strange, bizarre, awkward, but it's not evil, bad, or malicious. It's not evil, bad, or malicious. It just can be. Hey, look what I found. Well, a piece of chocolate. I'm gonna have to disinfect my hands and disinfect it. Hope it's still good. Oh, it's so small I can't even see. Let me see. Santa Cruz, I guess. Maybe. Bolivia. Oh my goodness. It's so small. See, sometimes Aspies. I never had chocolate from Bolivia. Gotta sing that rock and roll for the boys and girls in blue. I always sing that rock and roll for my brothers and sisters who do their criminal rehabilitation. As well, when you hear the sirens or see the flashes, slow down your car, slow down your driving, and do the citizen integrated security protocols for the coming of our empire. 180 degrees to the left, 180 degrees to the left. I found this right there in the corner. It's all in Spanish. I read Spanish. Clásico chocolate con leche con maní. With hands-made chocolate. Handmade chocolate, wow. It's quite something if you think about it. Let me see. Wow, I'm trying to see. So small. Where it's made. Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Wow. I never had Bolivian chocolate. Look at that. So tiny. So if you see somebody in a store, I do it, and my friend many years ago, you know, whenever I take a product, if I would see this in a store, I don't know if it was imported from Bolivia, because it's from Bolivia. I never had chocolate from Bolivia. I gotta check how much cocoa Bolivia produces, and of course this is 26 grams, and you get the information there. But see, it's Bolivia there. See, Bolivia, Parque Industrial Santa Cruz, Bolivia, Park Santa Cruz. It's from Bolivia. No, it's actually small print. It's not actually made in Bolivia. It says imported, importado y distribuito en Bolivia por Nestlé Bolivia, but it is not made in. Oh, it's made in Peru. We got the clarification. Fabricado por Nestlé Peru. Rug, then we have the number. Fábrica Lima Avenue, Venezuela. 2580. Cercado de Lima. Lima is the capital of Peru. Puede contener gluten y nueces de árbol. So if you see somebody in a store, I do this, and my friends sometimes for years and years told me, you know, people are looking at you and say, what is that weirdo doing? So I would, of course, get that rock and roll, of course, and we would inspect, sometimes so close, to check these little numbers and little details on, like that, close to the eye, and turn it and look at it. So that's somebody doing that. That might be somebody who is neurodivergent, who lives with Asperger's, and of course that is, of course, the somebody who lives with autism, with HFA, Asperger's, that might be the case. And that's why I do it. I guess it's a natural thing. It's just looking and inspecting details on labels, you know. So if you see somebody for a few seconds, a minute, 44, almost 45 seconds, whatever, doing that, that's most likely somebody who's like me, neurodivergent, who has Asperger's, HFA, high functioning autism, and thus we are, if you want to know what I'm doing or somebody else is doing, we're inspecting the label where it's made. I've been doing it for years, even before, way before the trade war began. Got Canada tatted up. You can't tell me nothing, but here we are. We gotta build bridges. See this bridge and see that bridge there, and this is where we are now for the congregation there. See where we are to be doing there, and that's where we gotta be, looking at that beautiful place. And this is where we're gonna stretch a bit to that, and that is where we're gonna be stretching a little bit for that, and that is something which we have to be doing, you know. So there's just something where we have to be, of course, in the proponent of things, where we are, of course, to be affluent about it, slow down a bit. Might be children running, and gotta give a little bit of that information there, and that is a little bit of that go, and that is something which we have, of course, to be stretching, and insecurity and the prudence, of course, to be now, and in all the dimensions where we are to be now, to get it on the go. And see, that's, of course, where we are now, to get it on the mountain. And thank you so much for the donation of that chocolate. You know, it gotta be made in that Bolivia, and it's something which we have, of course, to think about. I guess it was dropped, and I gotta disinfect my hands, eh? That's what I'm gonna do now, because I don't know how many people touched it. You know, it's important I'm gonna make it somewhere safe here. So here what I'm gonna do before I continue my journey is I'm gonna stretch here on the back, and at the same time I'm gonna stretch my back. Look, of course, at the island of Montreal, how beautiful of course it is with that downtown, and there we go often, of course, the mountain, my second home, Mount Royal, and that's where we go atop Mount Royal, second home, and that's what we gotta be doing on that, and now we gotta disinfect the hands and disinfect the little chocolate, because I don't know how many people touched it, and of course the personal microbes, personal hygiene is something which we have to be aware of. It traveled so many kilometers and miles to be reaching me, so I'm gonna take this little disinfectant, and of course it's efficient. It's small, but it's efficient, So put it on, spread it. Gonna spread it on my hands and spread it on disinfect the little envelope here. Sublime. Disinfect the little envelope, and that's all we got. Yeah, disinfect the hands now. Now that I disinfected it, and that's what we're gonna go do it, and doing of course ejaculation and being now, and doing the concordium of course to do, and that is something which we have to disinfect the hands, Disinfect the hands, super important. Hand sanitize the hands, and check out a little bit of where we are there, Look at that. That's where we are, and that's where we be, of course, to be, and to get it on the go. And there's just some things which you're gonna have to be protruding about. Turn your heads left and right. We salute. LOV. We love our ambulance drivers, we love our truckers, love our nurses, love our doctors, love our firefighters. It's not all about the money. Slow down, do the 360 if you hear the ambulance, do the 360, 180 to the left, 180 to the right, and of course that's just what we're gonna do, in all the circumstantial positions, of course, where we are now, and that is of course just the availability of all the, look at that. And that is, of course, just the plurality, of course, to be. And that is just something which we have to, of course, be mindful of. And that's what we have, of course, to be, of course, the civilizational productions that we are now, I'm joyous, man. I got that little chocolate bar. I'm really joyous. I guess small things sometimes, it's something which is required. And slow down, do the 180, and do of course the XYZ, and turn your heads left or right, and gotta get it on that drill, man, gotta get it on that drill, and look at that. Now I'm pretty now, I've been through a lot, and even if I'm broke, I don't have money, and I'm financially stressed, but hey, I found that little chocolate, and of course that little chocolate is of course something which I'm gonna enjoy after this march, and of course enjoying after this something which I'm gonna do, man. So all the way from first, I think I had before from Peru, chocolate from Peru, Bolivia maybe also. There's the 4th ambulance in just 4 minutes. Stay safe out there, it's not all about the money. 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 And now, see how my brain works, because I am different, and my brain now calculates mathematics. So whenever I'm close in proximity to a highway such as this, I see these 4 cars, and now my brain kind of automatically, what it does is, of course, it calculates. It, of course, calculates how much in potential, of course, they expend. So of course, being that they expend a certain amount, is of course they spend us in a certain amount, of course, which we have, of course, to understand, of course, that they have a variables. So their variables, they have a variation. So these are always variations. The variations, by meaning the car type, has a variation in how much it consumes per 100 kilometers. So those four cars, it might be that they're about the same, but they're probably not. The one probably consumes 11 liters per 100 kilometers, the other one 12 liters per 100 kilometers, the other one 13 liters per 100 kilometers, the other one 14 liters per 100 kilometers, right? So that is where we are, of course, consequently to, of course, be mindful about the joy of mathematics. And it's kind of a joy, you know, because I do it automatically. So when I was going on the bridge and I was seeing the police car and the other cars and the ambulances, I was doing it, the processing in my mind, I was doing the calculation of the mathematics, and of course now I'm doing, of course, the speculation of the cost and the burden thereof, because the prices of gas have increased and there's an increasing burden. There's a burden on the citizen consumer, especially in these tough economic times, and just the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, has, of course, 4 days ago declared that we are on a verge, potential, of course, of a collapse. And he didn't use the words collapse, but he used the words stupefying. So that is, of course, problematic, because of our deficit will increase in a big percentage. Our deficit will increase in a big percentage. So being that in 2020 the price of gas was about average 93 cents, and of course being that it was, of course, 93 cents, that this car and that car, regardless of their consumption, they still pay more per liter and more to get that same distance of 100 kilometers. They still pay about 75% more. So that is, the constant is how much gas all of the cars, that car, there's many cars across North America and all across Montreal. There's so many just here, but each car, the constant is, of course, the mathematical constant is always the same in terms of how much it is consuming per 100 kilometers. Oh my. So the consumption per 100 kilometers is the same for the car, but it varies from car type to car type, indeed. So that's the constant. That car will always consume about, but let's say 11 liters per 100 kilometers, right? And that car will consume maybe 12, that one 13, that one maybe another number. So that's the constant, which doesn't change for the individual unit of a car, right? So you have different units, which, let's say the cars are different units. But what is, of course, the variable is the price of gas, right? Because the price of gas always goes constant. But in majority, of course, the constant calculated with the variable, the price of gas, that is, of course, the fact that all cars pay about 75% more, right? 75% more since February 2020. You follow? So it affects the purchasing power, because a citizen driver will have to pay more for the gas to get from point A to point B. And if, of course, there is, like we discussed a priori, if there is a certain distance that is about an average per week that car and that car and that car drives, let's say 300 kilometers, that means that it goes up by so much, by a big percentage. So that's where we can have the big problems of the pocket, right? Because it sucks from the purchasing power. A citizen driver will buy less goods, and unless you're like a millionaire and a billionaire. But the majority of the population are, all of the drivers who are driving now, they can buy less bread, less bacon, less cheese, less potatoes, you know. Less bacon, less cheese, less potatoes. They can buy all that, you know. So that, of course, they can buy less of that. And myself, that's my only stress now, financial. But of course, because of Asperger's, has been difficult, you know. And I survived a surprise attack as well. I don't know if it was related to my Asperger's, and of course my memories black out. 2014, before like January, February, winter 2014. I have a problem remembering my life prior to 2014. But what personal memory loss doesn't affect linguistic capabilities, doesn't affect mathematical skills. It affects personal memory. Personal, so memory from high school, childhood, stuff like that. It's like a blackout, you know. It's like, and I was viciously surprise attack. Well, I survived a vicious surprise attack. I was hit in the head a few times, you know. I was hit in the head, so hey, look at these beautiful yellows. In the head, I don't know if it was with a blunt object or if it was with an object, but with a fist. A surprise attack, vicious surprise attack in the Montreal Metro on the island, and hit my head on the concrete, had a dislocated right arm, right shoulder. And I was bloodied up. Went, of course, to the Jewish General Hospital. I went to the Jewish General Hospital, of course. So I went to the Jewish General Hospital, was cracked back my right arm, right shoulder, and of course have been since then. I was put on some meds, and maybe I was an alcoholic for a few years. And I used to live in this moldy place, still on the island in Côte de Neige, underground, small. It was like a tight prison cell. I always say I served my time, and of course, having served my time with that is of course the consequential appellation where we have now to be. So of course, that is of course the appellation where we have now to be. That of course, that surprise attack. I'm gonna go retrieve my archives back in of course 20. That was maybe before 2014 or 2014 even. And of course, I'm gonna go retrieve my archives of course from the Jewish General Hospital. So of course, that is of course the retrieval where we have of course to get on that archives where we are now. And of course, I hope I get to retrieve those archives. But of course, being of course that fundamentally, it doesn't really matter. What matters mostly is my work, you know. What matters mostly is my work. And of course, the consequential work which I have is of course to be done now, and of course to be consequentially doing, and of course to be now involved in all the calculations which I'm doing now. Even my mind is mathematics, right? I see mathematics. So now I see that they're eating money. The cars are eating money, right? So now my mind, that is what I'm good at here, is mathematics and geopolitics and sports and fitness and rock and roll. As an Aspie artist, athlete, philosopher, you know, that is of course something which we have now, of course complementary to all the domain where we are now. And even that bike, but that bike I don't know exactly, because I'm not that good at bikes. But if an Aspie would exactly how much the cars are, if an Aspie would have how much the cars are consuming, that is, basically if an Aspie would have as a special interest cars, then that Aspie would know exactly how much that car is consuming. That it would be automatic. But my special interest, also known as a specific interest, are related to sports and fitness and geopolitics and rock and roll. And of course, that rock and roll is something which we have, of course, to do ourselves, as I do for the truckers, for the firefighters, for the butchers, for the bakers, for the nurses, for the doctors and the plumbers that you see, that you know you gotta be, and you know just what you see. That I am rock and roll up in the bees. Where there's bees, there's honey. For the truckers, I gotta see left and right and in the beat. You know that I gotta see. For the left and for the butchers, for the left and for the right. You know that we out of sight. Out of sight and out of flight. You know that we rainbow tight. And you know it. Swing those hips so that you don't miss it. Beautiful. Yeah, man. I'm pretty happy now, but I've been depressed and suicidal. A lot of Aspies suffer from depression and suicidal. And, you know, I don't know if I was in the closet, because for the past 11 years I am openly, you know, androgynous, pansexual, and part of the LGBTQ community, or black, white, black, rainbow, you know. Can come loving with me, but survived that vicious surprise attack. I am hyper-vigilant, but I don't like violence, but I am hyper-vigilant. I guess I got PTSD, I do have it, but I'm hyper-vigilant, but I'm not necessarily afraid, I'm not necessarily afraid. I'm more hyper-vigilant. I guess we all have some hidden fears, hidden lusts. Or maybe it was because of my difference, because Aspies were different, so that difference is of course something which we have, and of course that differential aspects of where we are now, being that we gotta admire also this beautiful sunset, and that is something which we have to do, you know, in the congregational aspects of all the civilizational affairs where we are. It is the privilege of civilization which we are to be now doing, you know. So it is the privilege of civilization which we are to now be involved with right here. And that is of course something which we have to do, and of course all the congregational aspects which we have of course interjected is something which we have of course to be in the domain names, and turn your heads left or right, and that's all we do, rock and roll so that you see left or right, and that you be it. For you know you gotta love it as I go up in the left, and the right, you know I said that, you know I've been the bled. So yeah, I'm hyper-vigilant, you know, but I don't like violence. I'm just hyper-vigilant, and my hyper-vigilance, I guess it's kind of required, for Aspies. We gotta give a shout out, beautiful spiders, and See, now they're eating. They're eating. They're eating. They're eating. All of them, they're eating. All of them, they're eating. They're eating, all of them. They're eating gas, eating gas, eating gas, eating gas. See, eating gas. All of them, they're eating money. And now my mind tries to, of course, calculate, calculate in the specifics. Calculate in the specifics. So calculating the specifics are, of course, important, of course, in the specific aspects, of course, of where we are now. So calculating that specific car, that car, that car, that car, that car, I'm not going to calculate them all, but all those 4 cars have a different, of course, appellation. And that is the fact that they are all consuming, eating money, eating more gas. And they all pay, how much percentage? 75%. 75%. 75% more. Right? All of them, they're eating 75% more. All of them, they're eating 75% more. All of them. That one, all of them are including myself. But myself, I'm spending more on food because I don't drive, you know. Of course, that is just how we are. That is just how we are. So basically, fundamentally, in all the aspects, of course, of the proposition, that is 75% more on gas. So all of them are spending 75% more. Even that one. See that one that's driving? So that is the fundamental, that is the constant. The constant is 75%. So that's not a variable, you know. That's just the constant. That is just the constant. And that is always so. Well, of course, in February 2020, it was 93 cents. Now it, of course, is way more. Way more than that. Way more than that is, of course. Way more than that. So it's way more. From 93 cents it jumped to how much? 160, 157, 156, 163, 164. Right? So for the past, increasingly, while the salaries have stagnated, and there are all these cars, and all the cars have paid 75% more on their gas. So that means that the citizen drivers have less purchasing power. Less purchasing power to buy cheese, to buy bread, to buy lettuce, to buy goods and services, I guess. I wish I could afford a massage therapy session, but you know, paradoxically, I have the solution, the DRT. The DRT is the solution, the debt refusion treaty for the creation of the UA, which I'm going to discuss in a bit. But just to finish the calculation on this specific area, because my mind now is calculating, of course, the parameters, mathematical, financial parameters. Of course, it's an estimation, but by having those mathematical principles, of course, the cost of gas is augmenting and increasing, right? And it's always the same. What's the same is the amount that they're sucking now in order to get to their point A or B or C, right? Because it's always that amount for 100 kilometers in consumption wise, right? But the variable is that they're paying 75% more to get that same distance, 100 kilometers fundamentally, to put it in another mathematical financial perspective, for that same distance. So all these cars are eating money now, going east, west, north, south. The truck, those 4 trucks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and those cars, whatever they are, the reality is that they're consuming more gas. They're not consuming necessarily more gas in liters, but the cost. So their consumption, in terms of monetary consumption, monetary spending, is upward, has increased. So that is the fundamentals of this economic, financial, commercial reality for all these brothers and sisters here who are drivers now. So they have less money to spend on other things, right? There's less money to spend on other things. For bread, for butter, for chicken, for lettuce. So that's why it's a great financial crisis. Now that's why my DRT, the debt refusion theory, is fundamentally the best. There's no there's something which resembles my DRT theory, is fundamentally, in essence, to be equilibrated, of course. But rather than that, of course, it has exists no real other solutions, to be honest. And now we're gonna just discuss 4 minutes on Asperger's, just for my fellow Aspies, as I salute the women's rugby team. I wish I would have been a billionaire. I would have given him all the players. Grind your head. I guess my head was already banged up years and years ago in that surprise attack, so no thanks. That's the neuroplasticity, eh? Of course, having been depressed or suicidal, and of course having got out of being depressed or suicidal, and of course that crossing Canada coast to coast made me come out of being depressed and suicidal, because Aspies, we face difficulties, and no, not all Aspies and people with autism are good at computers. The average percentile in terms of the statistical proportion is higher than for you, who are the 99%, the neurotypicals who constitute the majority of the population, is about 20%. So 1 out of 5 Aspies are good at computers, but that's 20%, not all, right? Above average mathematical skills, yes, myself, I love math, but it's a Aspie love, it's a love. When I say love, it's from an Asperger perspective type of that. It's a constant, always formulating and thinking in certain mathematical terms, whether proportions, distances, percentage, finance, money, consumption, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, right? And so, besides, of course, what I said, of course, it is the propositions integrally to what Asperger's is not, where we have to draw the line, is when we say, of course, that Asperger's is not a disease. It's not a disease. And that Aspies are not bad, evil, malicious, negative. We're not negative, malicious, evil, bad, negative, malicious, or evil, bad, evil, malicious, or negative, evil, malicious, bad. No, we're different. But this difference, of course, in distinctions comes, of course, from us having these kind of brain mutations. And of course, now the recent discussion about Tylenol, it's not actually Tylenol, it's the acetaminophen is the ingredient in Tylenol. Being a brand, is that ingredient, which supposedly used during pregnancies increases potential autistic development in children. I don't know about that. I'm not going to pronounce myself in any way whatsoever in regards to that matter, right? What I do know is that I live with Asperger's. I live with HFA, and it's been a hard road. It's been more than 9 years that I've been diagnosed and told, and of course being diagnosed and told, of course, by many individuals and citizens, of course, that this Aspiness is not evil, bad, or negative, or malicious. It is, of course, what it is, and of course it is that it is a neurodivergent mental condition which makes us predisposed to special interest, and of course those special interests can preoccupy most of our days. Our routines and our daily affairs are, of course, preoccupied in those special interests, also known as obsessive interests, which I don't use the word obsessive terminology because it doesn't render Aspies like myself any justice or furtherance and clarification, because when I'm involved daily for hours and hours in geopolitical analysis, which is my special interest, geopolitics, parallel, of course, to sports and fitness, dancing is my favorite sport, and of course rock and roll, and I wish I would have give to the rugby team of Canada, congratulations, second place is good. We lost against England, but we beat New Zealand to go to the finals. A good victory against New Zealand in the semi-finals, and what a rugby greatness, eh? I love it. I love women's sports. My favorite sport is dancing, but if I would have been a billionaire, I would have given them a big check, like $100,000 each or something, Just, hey, here, go. Great job to go to the finals, and they're not paid that much, women's sports, and I wish I could support by buying tickets regularly, all tickets, home tickets for Victoire here, the Professional Women's Hockey League. It's go women's sports, go truckers, bakers, butchers, nurses, doctors, and those changing diapers in the daycares and beautiful sunset there. So that is of course all the fundamental aspects where we have of course in the reality of course to be now propositions. And back to Asperger's, of course it is neurodivergence, which of course makes us predisposed again to these special interests, and the way we communicate can sometimes be strange, bizarre and awkward, right? But we have to draw the line. It's not a disease. That's what people have to comprehend. It's not a disease, right? Because I remember people were whispering, when I was working, because I had many jobs. I lost sometimes. Aspies, the problem is we lose our jobs, after 4 months, 3 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, 4 days, And I remember people at work said, that's a disease. In French, c'est une maladie, So I remember they whispering, that's a disease. And it's not a disease, It's not a disease, It's not a disease. It's not. My androgyny and being androgynous, pansexual, pansexuality, that's my BDSM switch love, that consent 18 plus, you got to be an adult for that one. I've been in the open for as long as I remember, because who I was before 2014, I died many times. I survived COVID. I died during COVID, nothing that I will to go back to. And I moved from that moldy place, which I didn't even have a bathtub properly. Now I can take a bath, grateful for that. And I didn't even have a kitchen. The kitchen was of course in my room. The kitchen was, so I had a small underground moldy place. I moved from that place. It was like a tight prison cell. I always say I served my time there, and just because I sometimes take blunt, I do a little bit of citizen initiative security when I in march, and when I do this workout marching dances, that I remove sharp objects where kids can be potentially harming their feet or their bodies or their of course hands, and that is just something which of course have to be. So of course that is just something which we have now to be appellated where we got, and that's just the distinction of how Asperger's functions in the functionality where we got of course the concordium now, and that is just the concordiate where we have of course to implement all the domains in the implementation of these strategies which I put on the table, such as the DRT for the North American Collectif. So before I go into that, because that's what I'm fundamentally good at, geopolitics, rock and roll, sports and fitness, dancing, well, I'm not so good at other things. My androgyny being I'm 50-50. I was born in a previous lifetimes, previous incarnations, a man, a woman, a woman, a man, a woman, a man, a woman, a man, man, a woman, woman, a man, man, a woman, woman, man, man, a woman, woman, a man. And of course, you get that 50-50 now as the priestess, Pitya, who orated the great Rithria, to Lycurgus. I was the great priestess. Pitya, who orated the great Rithria to Lycurgus. I was the great priestess who orated the great Rithria to Lycurgus. Well, salute the trains here, see? So this is, now my brain now works concorded to these trains. I don't know if they're going east and west, but maybe they're carrying grain. See, maybe grain, maybe wheat, maybe barley, maybe corn. Maybe rice, maybe other grains, maybe canola. But I know that we're open for sabotage and espionage because of the DMAA, which I'm going to discuss in a bit, the direct military assistance and action. So now I'm going to discuss in Concordiate, finalize on Asperger's, and go Aspies go, But it's been a tough road for me to accept it, to integrate it, to absorb it. And now, it's been better these past years. I survived COVID. I moved in 2015 summer. I used to live in a moldy place, still on the island, underground basement in Côte des Neiges. It was small. I didn't even have a bathtub. I have a bathtub now, and yeah, I'm craving a massage therapy session. Don't waste my time, I won't waste yours. And friends with benefits only, or pledge your allegiance to our family. To support the DRT's implementation, Debt Fusion Treaty, CIT Citizen Integration Treaty, and the DFT, Democratic Fusion Treaty via the fourth dimension LOV for the creation of the coast to coast of the integral proposition of where we are now for the North American Collective, for the 63, for the bakers, the butchers, the nurses, the doctors, the firefighters, the plumbers, the electricians, the welders, and all those involved in the production, distribution of food. That's where we got to get on that complementary to be now. So that is, of course, all the life-affirming matters where we find ourselves now as a neurodivergent individual sovereign citizen who might not be so good, but I'm getting better at social communication, social interaction, personal space. So we have these characteristic traits which can be awkward, weird, and bizarre, such as getting too close to converse. When we converse, we might get so close to a citizen. We might get so close to a citizen, We might get so close to a citizen, of course, that it is very close that we breach that personal space, and this can cause an alarm, a concern, can cause discomfort, can cause even wariness, and can be so my friend always says, hey, take a step back, you're too close. And thank you for gifting me 2 books on autism, and 1 book was loaned, a library loan specific on Asperger's, which has merged with autism. It's also known as HFA, right? High functioning autism. They're one and the same. And also the book was published before Asperger's merged with autism, and I gotta give a shout out for renting it from the library, loaning it, and let me read it a few times. It's called Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome. This is a great book for people with Asperger's. It's called Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome, and it has made me also see with my eyes and my self-analysis and introspection how the suffering and the struggles that I've been through are, of course, a major part of this aspiness, and how we are different, and maybe even that surprise attack was due to this being different and having Asperger's, this mental divergence, which is not a mental illness, and parallelly that we have certain things with which are great, excellent, and super good, which usually revolve around our special interest. Usually they revolve around our special interest, which can be several. My holy trinity is sports, fitness. Dancing is my favorite sport. Even now I dance a little bit with my head, my hair, my toes, my tongue, my heart. And of course, the rock and roll. I always sing that rock and roll. I'm not necessarily good with the language, linguistic, the vocals, and have a sweet goddess, God voice. And it's always God bless, goddess, God this kissed the empire, because I mystic double troubled both spiritually. And of course, that is the other circumposition of this reality, is that the book Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome has made me reflect upon my own vulnerabilities and how certain ignorances of social norms, social communication, group dynamics, hive mind mentality, and all that can put us at risk. Losing jobs, for example. And we got to build bridges, whether we build small bridges, medium-sized bridges, large bridges, or extra large bridges with you, the 99% with which I have no antagonistic, resentful feelings. We got to work together to secure freedom, ensure liberty, and for prosperity. I'm not totally selfless, I'm not totally selfish. I try to be in the middle split, 50-50 for myself and for the others, for the individual and for the collective, our empire, the 63, let it rise and let it be, because I'm calling fundamentally for a mass public-private partnership. When I say support the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom, is fundamentally a mass public-private partnership across the North American collective, of which we are a new civilizational complex, which is not totally divorced, but is distinct from Western civilization. That is, of course, the dictum, the realities of myself as a philosopher, that I always say that we are an emergent civilizational complex, which is not totally divorced, but is distinct from Western civilization. So I'm going to finalize on us with Asperger problems that we encounter the most. Our lack of friends. No, don't waste my time. Will not waste yours. To be fully understood from now on. September 28, 2025. In that parallel life, it is November 28, the year of darkness 2029, where I also have Asperger's, but they are my primary interest, and my special interest, aka obsessive interest, is telecommunication science, and I build supercomputers, satellites, microchips, supercomputers, microchips, and antennas, everything to do with webcams, telecommunication. And it's the year of darkness 2029, where I built in consortium with other scientists super satellites. And in that parallel timeline, 2029, Israel is part of NATO. And of course, I spend my life between Canada, Germany, United States, and Israel. As in that year 2029, Israel is part of NATO. And if you know, before October 7th, as a philosopher, geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, philosopher, and developer of strategies, I developed strategies, geopolitical strategies for the North American Collective for many, many years now. And much of my theories, I discuss them. I don't discuss them in depth because they're, of course, by national security sensitive, such as the total mobile defense theory, the total mobile defense theory, which, of course, has to be implemented across the North American Collective ASAP, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, and to fuse in the Imperium Public private partnership complex. That's the dream. So what do we face? There's Aspies, and I have faced, and also not just lack of friends with benefits only, or pledge your allegiance to our family, pledge your allegiance to our family. And of course the other is high unemployment. I had jobs, many jobs. I lost them after a few months, 4 months, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, few weeks, few days, 4 days. Aspies, we get jobs, we get employment, is keeping them because we're different. So when it comes to certain things, socially we might be weird, awkward, and even, the higher ups, the supervisor might say, hey, this is weirdo, that's a disease, or that's a mental. No, it's not that. It's just our brains functions differently, and we have to be told more directly, and we do. I'm a doer. I like doing, and my anonymous friend has been a hell of a road, and I'm a doer. I just have my own faults, yes, but it's always the dynamic of, like, just ask. If you want to, sadomasochistic, just ask. I don't mind being, being of service, priestess, HNH, keep my name out of your mouth if it's not for blessing. Just ask or pledge your allegiance, otherwise let my name be pestilence. My name be pestilence. Pestilence, Hydra and Hana, dragon, black, white, or rainbow. You want to LOV with me, then we love, and that's it. If I can offer some service, otherwise what for? It's like, yeah, we're different, but we're not evil, bad, or negative, or malicious, You got to be 18 plus for the more adult-oriented services, though. You got to be an adult. I'm going to card you, just like when you go to get here, cannabis is legal since 2019, or when you go get booze, or when you go get liquor, I'm going to say, show me the cards, B. Show me those cards, show me you're 18, show me proof of age, But Aspies, we wouldn't know if somebody's interested, I guess because of that book and my own learning, I would maybe be able to pick more and more upon it. In the past 44 months, I certainly made a lot of progress, but I guess for a long time was a hardcore Aspie who was masking, I guess, and unaware of this difference fully. And I just lived in the world as a kind of alienish extraterrestrial in the neurotypical world until all the sufferings, the struggle, not losing friends, Also, high unemployment, it's unacceptable, 80%. The other one is dropout rates. I have a high school diploma. So I graduated high school, so I do have a high school diploma. I graduated high school, I have a high school diploma, right? So I have a high school diploma, I graduated a high school diploma. I do have a high school diploma. I did graduate. I dropped out of college, I don't remember that far. My memory blacks out like January-ish, February-ish 2014, which is a long time ago. 2014, winter 2014 is more than 11 years and a half ago, because we're autumn 2025, so like more than 11 years and 7 months ago. Maybe I was a junkie. I don't know if I was doing drugs, if I was consuming alcohol. Maybe I was doing hard drugs and alcohol, and I know I was depressed for a few years, from like summer 2014 to like summer 2017, and crossing Canada coast to coast with my anonymous friend got me out of being depressed and suicidal, and I got out of being depressed and got out of being suicidal, and that was, of course, me coming out of being depressed and coming out of being suicidal. And that depression and suicidalness, by crossing Canada coast to coast, I established a strong esprit de corps. So that was me when I had a revelation. I said, so many great things to see, to do here across Canada, to do across Canada. So I established that as strong esprit de corps with my fellow Canadians, who are family, and of course that establishment with my brothers and sisters in the 50 states, because we got to work to reestablish, and that's what we got to do. So those are the main problems, and lack of friends. Unemployment is very unacceptably high. It's horrible, 80%, 4 out of 5. Of course, dropout rates are very high for Aspies and people with autism and HFA, high functioning autism. And the other problem is, of course, high depression and suicidal rates. So those are the 4 big problems for Aspies which we encounter, which I don't need a lot of support. I just need more understanding, more understanding, and business and work, pledge allegiance to our family, friends with benefits only. Don't waste my time, I won't waste yours. I have my routines, and I don't mind change, especially economic, financial. I guess I changed 4 times in the past 11 years and a half. Moving was a great thing, and then my depression was pretty hardcore, because even where I lived there, I was depressed for like a few years. But crossing Canada coast to coast in 2017, I'm auctioning those tickets, train tickets and bus tickets, coast to coast, ocean to ocean. That was what got me out of being depressed and suicidal. Just crossing Canada was a great event for my life. my life was really, really good. It changed my whole life. I remember when I was in Banff in 2017, I said, wow, this is the Rockies, this is Canada, what a great country. I don't remember when I got that Canada tatted up, because you know I got it tatted up on me, the flag always, but that was a great event. So yeah, Aspies of the world unite, and my only stress now is financially, but now we're gonna go into what I do most on a daily basis and what I excel at. Geopolitics, excel at. Geopolitics. Leave the baggage at the door when you enter. Dragon geopolitical theories, analysis, philosophies, and strategies, which includes the DRT, the Death Row Fusion Theory, fundamentally for the North American Collective, NORAD, NATO complex. Some theories, philosophies, and strategies, such as the Total Mobile Defense Theory. I can't fully discuss the Total Mobile Defense Theory. I can't fully discuss the TMDT, Total Mobile Defense Theory, TMDT, because it's binational NATO security complex, and I can only discuss it this Tuesday. The Hegseth is going to be discussing with some generals, and I should have been there, you know, to discuss the strategies. But I invite all generals, leaders, public-private leaders to the Mountain Mount Royal invitation. Let's do it on the 24th of December, 25th. Big holidays. Let's do it big. 24th, 25th, march to the mountain. This is part of another 40-day journey, right? So that is the fundamentals where we are now in equilibrium to be. And of course, these fundamentals are the aspects where we now inclined to discuss geopolitics. So leave the baggage at the door. Being that I am an independent geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, philosopher, and thinker and strategist, and that's my special interest, that's where I excel at. What I'm going to say next, I have proof for this. I predicted in 2019 that there will be an international conflagration. In October 17th, 2019, I posted the first video on my YouTube channel discussing the coming international conflagration, the coming World War III, based on an in-depth geopolitical analysis, academic, scholarly, geopolitical in terms of the theory and philosophies thereof. And one of the main premises and fundamental motives for my conclusion that humanity is set again towards an international conflagration, for one and all to know, is that many conflicts of the 20th century, especially during the Cold War period, were not fully resolved. If you look at many conflicts which have reignited, and my prediction that they will reignite, and the possibility of surprise attacks, surprise military joint attacks by geopolitical regions. That was one of the major aspects of it, that geopolitical regions or countries, alliances of countries will attack NATO member countries or potentially other countries, and the NATO countries would get involved. So if you look at the world today, if you look at the conflicts which have reignited, Russia-Ukraine is the conflict which dates from the 20th century, during the Cold War period. So they were not able to resolve their 20th century conflicts. Right? Their 20th century conflicts. They were not able to resolve their 20th century conflicts. Their 20th century conflicts. 20th century conflicts. They did not resolve it, you know. They did not resolve their 20th century conflicts. 20th century conflicts. They did not resolve their conflicts. Russia, Ukraine. Hamas is an organization which was founded, sing that rock and roll for the boys and girls in blue, and also sing that rock and roll for my brothers and sisters who do their criminal rehabilitation, man. If you do that criminal rehabilitation, if you do your criminal rehabilitation, I always sing that rock and roll for the boys and girls in blue. If you do your criminal rehabilitation, I gotta applaud. I gotta sing both, you know, for both. Yeah, that's the purpose, you know, justice. And we're not perfect. We're our institutions. I'm not perfect, you know. If we have to have my brothers and sisters who are different, my blacks, brothers and sisters who are blacks, including my neighbors, you know, we have to work on it. And sometimes these things we are not even aware that we have them, eh? Discriminations and subconscious. You know, sometimes they're subconscious. So that's why we gotta better do hugs and push-ups and a little bit of sharing and a little bit of mutual understanding and a little bit of mutual working togetherness, you know. because my brothers and sisters, for example, who are blacks, are 13.3, 13.4%, and our institutions are not perfect. Individuals who are police officers are not perfect. Firefighters are not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm flawed. I got scars on my body. You know, I got all the scars and plenty of scars. Actually, perhaps a little bit too many of the scars. But it's, of course, something which, of course, we have to work together. And then we have to be mindful that we're a collective as well. And all who come to join us in the collective North American civilizational complex, which is going to be the fusion of the 63 thereof. So, the geopolitical world has seen these conflicts. The world has seen these conflicts reunite. Hamas is an organization which dates from the 20th century. From the 20th century. Now, like I said, before October 7th, the attack, surprise attacks, which Israel calls their 9/11, before October 7th, I was advocating for what I called NATO Project Genesis 33, reference to the Jacob and Esau, the twins, the Bible, who hugged and kissed and reconciled and made an alliance, I guess, for NATO, for Israel, simultaneously Israel and Mexico to become respectively the 32nd and the 33rd member of NATO before October 7th, because last year in 2024, Sweden joined. In the meantime, Sweden joined, became the 32nd of NATO. And of course, my plateaus and initiatives are mostly for NORAD, Canada, United States, but extended for NATO and then for world peace and expansion. But I predicted what's happening now, this crisis. And now we have crisis economically. But I have to be honest and say what I did not predict was, of course, the deterioration of relations with the United States. So that I did not predict. I predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration, but I did not predict that our relations with the United States will deteriorate so much as they have now, right? So that I did not predict. So this is new for me, the re-election of Donald Trump. And you know that since 2018, I've been challenging Donald Trump to a boxing match. Since 2018, I've been challenging Donald Trump to a boxing match. Since 2018, I have. Because I got those red gloves, which were gifted from my anonymous friend. I got them gifted in 2018, and I'm auctioning them for $1 million to give her $1 million, to give her half. I'm auctioning them. Actually, I have to auction them for more. For more, because they're worth more. Because I warned them. You know, I warned them. I had them on me. So that is an increase, which I have to do. So it is Dragon versus Trump since 2018, you know. And now that I'm discussing Dragon versus Trump, I also gotta say that, again, that I did not predict that the Canadian-Sino relations will deteriorate to such a degree, right? So that's new for me as well. So I have to take it into account that I did not predict the deterioration of relations with the US, you know. This is new. I did not. I predicted an international conflagration, but I did not predict that our relations with the US will be so low. And of course, the statement that I'm about to make now in regards of the bilateral relations, being that I also was born in the United States post-76 3 times, once as a woman, twice as a man, and served in the same United States Armed Forces. Once as a woman I was born, twice as a man, many past lives, previous incarnations. I was even the priestess Pythia, who orated the great retreat to Lycurgus, and post-76 in the US. Once I was born as a woman, twice as a man. Just read George Patton, Three Glass Darkly. One of my favorite generals' poem is Three Glass Darkly, and there he discusses reincarnation, but he there states that, well, he discusses reincarnations and he discusses only his male incarnations. He didn't mention that he was my wife once, because once he was my wife, I was his husband, and once I was his wife, and he was my husband. So we kind of evened up. I was his wife, I was his husband, he was my wife, he was my husband, so vice versa. So that is just something which is to accord and to finalize on my beliefs surrounding reincarnations. And we're just gonna go to the stairs there, and then we're gonna come back and finish the discussion on my 2019. So I predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration, right? What I did not predict again was that we are going to live and have these relations deteriorate with the United States to the point that it gives me goosebumps where I discuss it, that since August 1st we're designated as an unusual, an extraordinary threat to the United States. Since 25 August of this year, since August of this year, the motive and the reason why the United States administration, Trump and his administration, decided to increase tariffs on Canada, one of the reasons was, of course, given that fentanyl crossings has tripled since last year, right? And the point that we have not coordinated, our law enforcement did not coordinate with the United States. Now, law enforcement of the United States. Now, coordination implies action. When you cooperate it could be just exchanging information. So coordination implies joint action. Coordination. Cooperation is different. When you cooperate, you can only exchange information or XYZ. But when you coordinate, it usually implies action. And of course, another motive is, given there, the fact that super labs are increasing domestically. And just last year, this is here, the RCMP, our federal police force, which is the equivalent of the FBI, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police was the fact that on the 25th of October, on the 25th of October, the RCMP dismantled in Surrey, dismantled, destroyed, I guess, and seized the drugs, the weapons, and the money, and arrested individuals, part of a transnational criminal syndicate organized group, which were running the biggest ever drug super lab in the history of Canada. They were running the biggest ever drug super lab in the history of Canada. They were running the biggest ever drug super lab in the history of Canada. They were operating the biggest ever drug super lab. What if this transnational criminal syndicate organized group has 5? If it had 5 and one was disbanded by the RCMP last year, 25th of October, that means there's 4 to go. And the amount of fentanyl that was seized there? Listen to this, I get goosebumps. It was about 95 million doses, okay? 95 million doses could have potentially killed the population of Canada twice over. It's not even been a year. 25th of October in Surrey, BC, check it out by the RCMP. Check drug seizures, RCMP, 25th of October, you're going to see in BC, British Columbia. So the RCMP has warned us since about 2015. They sounded the alarm years and years and years ago that there's a growing transnational criminal syndicate organized groups taking root in Canada, implementing their drug strategies and developing networks in Canada, growing transnational criminal syndicate organized groups. We have even sought to interfere in our elections. Since 2015, the RCMP has warned us. So for more than a decade, we've been warned by 10 years ago. And even during COVID, about 4 years ago, in 2021, the RCMP sounded the alarm since 2015 and even more during COVID. And last year, what happens? This happens, and this year, by the United States, we're designated as an unusual, this is serious, we're designated as an unusual and extraordinary threat by the United States to the American people from Canada. That's black and white there stated, verbatim per verbatim, that there's an unusual and extraordinary threat to the American people from Canada. You realize the national security implications here. This is serious. We have to fuse the RCMP and the FBI. We have to fuse, but also in a mass public-private partnership with healthcare, the best of Canada, with the best of the United States, and to rehabilitate the criminal population, those who will to have a rehabilitation, our brothers and sisters who are financially stressed, just like myself. If I wouldn't have moved from there, I think I would have been dead or in jail, or maybe I would have become an underworld criminal organization. No, because I'm for justice, I'm for justice, for justice, for justice, but I'm just saying, I guess, if I was so desperate, I guess, but no, more Robin Hood, I rock and roll with our Robin Hood stuff, but Robin Hood stuff, maybe that way, I would have become a criminal underworld figure just to steal from the criminals organizations and give to the poor. I'll give the money from the billions and billions from the international mafia, international criminal organized groups to give to the workers and the poor and the maybe that's, I don't know, I'm just today speculating, possible life. But what matters is my work, and what matters is really today. But our main interest, and this is just like the pi symbol, the mathematical pi symbol representing the constant realities, for mathematical realities, is the pi, the letter N. N for Normandy, natural, neurodivergent, neurotypical, or Normandy, normal, natural, neurodivergent, neurotypical. The N. N has two heads, two faces. That's why our coming empire of the 63 will have two heads, two faces, and one for benevolence, goodness, and kindness, and the other one, I guess, to punish. One for benevolence, goodness, and kindness, and the other one, I guess, to punish. One, I guess, for benevolence, goodness, and kindness, and the other one's to punish. One for benevolence, goodness, and kindness, and the other one, I guess, to punish. One, I guess, for benevolence, goodness, and kindness, and I guess the other one maybe the other head to punish. Because the N, pi, the symbol is not an edible pie that you can eat, but the pi symbol is always 3.1416. It relates to the circumference, is the relation between the diameter and the circumference of a circle. The relation between the diameter and the circumference of the circle. So it's always 3.1416. So that is, of course, the clarification of what I just said, of course, in the integral aspects of where we are now, So the integral aspects of where we are now, look at those four. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how my brain now works because of my neurodivergence. I try to calculate. See, it looks like it's an angle. It looks like it's a 60-degree angles. But this, of course, how it's put there, it's of course a line, and this looks like it's closer to a 90-degree angle here. So now my brain is going a bit of the angles and the mathematics. But of course a circle has 360. So with this we can make a circle, right? If we put them like this, see, I'm going to show you. There are 4 different ones. So put like that, we can make actually 2 circles, see? The trajectory of 1 and 1. See, 1 and 1. See, we got 1 and 1, right? If we put them in an axis like this, these 4 red ones, my favorite color, then we have here, inside the axis is 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, so circle. Then this one we have also, because it's 2 and 2, with 2 like this, we can make 4. Right, we cut it in the middle, the 2 gives a circle. So what I was saying earlier, that the pi symbol is always 3.14, which is the relation of the circumference with a circle, but it's the circumference, but it's not the angles. The angles of a circle are always, there's 360, right? So a pi is 360, and to get 90 degrees, we get 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are 90 degrees, and of course they can change, but like put like that, they're 90 degrees, see what I'm saying there? This one, there are 4 different sticks, right? With 4 sticks, I can make 2 axes, right? See? With this stick, and that stick, and that stick, I can make 4 axes. See here, how it's 1 axis that's separated right in the midpoint, so that gives 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Added them all up, that's 90 plus 90 is 180, plus 90, 270, plus 90, 360. So they both have 360 degrees. So of course, those degrees, just like the pi symbol has 2 heads, so our empire of the coming 63, we're going to fuse Canada and the United States, will be 2-headed, one for benevolence, goodness, and kindness, and the other one for justice and punishment if you will, punishment if you will, punishment if you will, punishment if you will. So it's like two-headed, two-headed empire. For 63 years we're gonna fuse Canada and United States, and that's the future for the 21st century, which starts with me now on this marching rock and roll meditative with my androgynous aspie, mystical, semi-mystical, spiritual, real down towards geopolitics. And we have to accord what I'm going to say now with a yes, 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 yes. You cannot say no, you cannot say maybe. Our main relations, our main interest when it comes to our foreign affairs, both Canada and United States, Canada vis-a-vis the United States and the United States vis-a-vis us, that is exactly like the constant, which it doesn't change, of the number representing the relation between the circumference and the diameter of a circle. It's always the pi symbol, which is 3.1416. 3.1416, which is 3.1416. So that is always 3.1416. Thus, for us, our main interest is to work to establish the most cordial economic, social, financial, diplomatic relations with the United States. Food waste, man. Food waste. Interesting, because I just mentioned like two heads, two faces. Is to have the best, most cordial economic, social relations with the United States, right? So that is always the same. That is always the same. So it doesn't change, right? It doesn't change. That is always the same. Thus, our main interest is to have the best, most cordial relations with the United States. That doesn't change. You have to say yes to that. What I put in this, that doesn't change. So see, there's a triangle here. Love you, spider. So that doesn't change. Anybody want to find it? I go up and down these stairs. That's what I'm gonna do, go up and down and go back home when I'm getting hungry by that side. So our main interest is to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial relations with the United States. There's no no. There's no yes. That has to be affirmed. You cannot say no to that, right? So when I say, of course, that is the best relations which we gotta accord with the United States, you have to say yes. So fundamentally, there's a non-negotiable. You cannot negotiate with that. Those are the fundamental aspects I mean, because you could call it what you want, but that is just the relations where we are now. So you, me, us, whoever you are, we must of course have the best, most cordial relations with the United States. With the United States. So now we go back into the jungle. Imagine if I go up and down here, I guess 300 times. Anybody want to finance? If I go up and down 300 times with that, maybe that's what will do it, you know. Maybe that's what will do it. There'll be some great economy with that. Great economical way to save on going to a gym, you know. Great economical way to save into a gym. If you save into a gym, that's going to be a great economy, you know, to get it on the go. And that is what we're going to have to do, you know. Maybe save on the gym here with some rocks, you know. There's some rocks there. Not today, that's the trend upper body, so that's what it is. But quite nice stairs. Thank you, you know, for them who built it. You know, I built that, and that's what we got, of course, in the dimensions where we do now, you know, to get the propositions and discuss our theories, which have to be implemented. So that you cannot negate. Our main, look at that spider, L-O-V. It's a good omen for me and B. My friend to get well. So our main interest is, of course, is to have the best, most cordial economic, social, military affairs with the United States. That cannot be negated. That cannot be even negotiated with. And that just is the fundamental, the reality. Of our civilizational complex. Just gonna hydrate a bit. So now that is recorded, I want to discuss quickly the DMA, military assistance in action. I'm gonna drink it all, 500 milliliters. That is, of course, 500 milliliters of water. Thank you, my another friend, for the filters. I contributed a bit. You're not going to have to contribute some more, but that is, of course, just the operative, of course, fundamentals of where we are now. So now we're going to discuss the DMAA, the Direct Military Assistance in Action. What is the DMAA? The Direct Military Assistance in Action is not just a theory, it's a working tool, it's a protocol, of course, for NATO to be incorporated in NATO member countries in order for us to move in the future complex where we're going to take those decisions and frameworks and we're going to deliberate on potential consequences of the DMAA, because the DMAA, Direct Military Assistance in Action, has in parentheses the C, which is potential consequences of course, of direct NATO assistance and military assistance, which is relegated to a possibility such as even nation states, powerful nation states, to have even funded that transnational criminal syndicate organized groups who was working and who had developed, created, and made that super lab which had 95 million fentanyl pills, which could have killed the population of Canada twice over, which the RCMP Salute, 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 salute. Dismantled 25th of October 2024. Last year, barely last year. So that fentanyl now has caused us a big problem with the United States. So fundamentally, in essence, that is of course the DMAA. Thank you, my anonymous friend with whom I had a discussion, a bit intellectual, academic, and showed me the parallel vision that it was, of course, not to be relegated in all the domain where we have now prudently and vis-a-vis that it can be misinterpreted or lacking compassion. It's not that it's lacking compassion or empathy, but it has nothing to do with providing humanitarian action and assistance. So it's military. That's why DMAA. So no, it does not include nation states providing food, shelter, providing, of course, other things such as sanitation pads, baby powder, things of that nature, toothbrushes, baby powder, toothbrushes, food, sanitation powder, antiseptic hand sanitizer, soap, hygienic products, etc., etc., etc. Military, for example, DMAA. Now today relevant, Canada and other NATO member countries, of which there are 32 total member countries, and you know Ukraine was not part of NATO, Israel is not part of NATO, Taiwan either, neither is Pakistan or India, right? It's 32 member countries. Turkey is, Canada, United States, Mexico is not. It has to do with, of course, NATO member countries taking action or assistance. Action was, for example, in Libya, against ISIL, in Syria, against, of course, in Belgrade, Serbia also. Assistance is, for example, providing munitions, artillery, helmets, drones, and of course, armored vehicles which are provided by Canada to Ukraine. And that creates the potential consequence that potentially Russia, of course, with other countries, because we also assisted militarily, Taiwan assistance has been provided that day. And this is a real consequence, the Russia-China solidification of relations. They solidified their alliances to counterpoise the DMAA, direct military assistance and action, done by NATO in the past and now in the present vis-a-vis Ukraine. So it's just like the motto of NATO says, animus in consuelo liber. It has to be, that stands for Latin for a mind unfettered in deliberation. Animus in consuelo liber, so it's a mind unfettered in deliberation. It's a mind unfettered in deliberation. A mind unfettered in deliberation. A mind unfettered in deliberation. You know, that's what it is. It's a mind unfettered in deliberation. That's the Latin motto, of course. That's what it stands for, and that's what it is. So a mind unfettered in deliberation. That is, of course, the relationship and the vis-a-vis all, of course, of the civilizational aspects of which we found ourselves in today. NATO NORAD complex is affected in many ways by a potential sabotage and espionage, and even secret services of China, Russia, and other nation states which are not part of NATO because of the DMAA that are working together, and of course to create and support transnational criminal syndicate organized groups. Transnational criminal syndicate organized groups, such as potentially that one which had that super lab, which could have, just one lab could have killed the doses produced of fentanyl, and more I'm declaring fentanyl as a bioweapon rather than a drug, because it doesn't make sense that people are dying so much of them. So more I'm classifying this as a bioweapon, the fentanyl, you know. So that is just something which I have, of course, to instrumentally meditate upon more deeply. But more I'm declaring fentanyl as a bioweapon. So the DMAA has consequences. You have to meditate, you have to deliberate on them. It has to be included as a frame of a working tool. A working tool as a frame of reference for taking decision-making tool, basically processes. It has to be incorporated into NATO, the DMAA. It's gold. I'm financially stressed, but the DMAA has more details to it, but it's gold. And that is the potential consequences by the DMAA taken by NATO member countries in the past or present now in Ukraine. One of the consequences is surely the solidification of the Russia-China alliance. The Russia-China alliance. So that is, of course, just the proposition of where we are now, you know. So where we are now in the North American Collective, I have to discuss the DRT, because we are facing, when the DRT contains the MIT Monetary Integration Treaty, which was implemented in the European Union, and because we are close to a financial collapse. Because we got four main problems which affect both the majority of Canadians and my brothers and sisters in the USA, which are the growing cost of living, prices are increasing, cost of rents. Even my rent went up, but I can't complain because it's allowed, because of it's below the percentage, maximum percentage allowed by the, of course, municipal, of course, rules and regulations of the place here where I live in Montreal. It's allowed, so of course the price of rents, my rent went up between $6 and $10, if you will. And of course the other proposition, of course, is the stagnation of the salaries, and the other is, of course, the going debt, credit cards. Even now somebody's swiping that credit card. So those four economic problems are pressing on the vast majority of Canadians and my brothers and sisters in the USA. So my DRT to the rescue from potential global financial Armageddon, as the PBO, parliamentary budget officer, just stated that Canada is in deep trouble. Stupefying, which is very problematic. Never heard some words before, at least of my knowledge of the past 11 years in the past 21st century. But prices are just increasing every day. A lot of prices are increasing. We got strikes. So my DRT is the solution. It requires a mass public-private partnership. My brother citizen Scorpio, Bill Gates, BlackRock and Blackstone are two different financial institutions, but basically we're the RBC as well, North American, because it has to be implemented by nationally, Canada, United States, as part of the bipolar geopolitical strategy to fuse Canada and United States for total BDD, benevolent dominance and dominion, by fusing Canada into the imperial democratic complex via mass public-private partnership. And we're going to create two complementary covenant institutions thereof, and fuse the RCMP and the FBI, and do a mass census, build 44 tunnels, and mass finance tourism. 4 days going to be accorded to every imperial citizen. We're going to have Novus Civis, we're going to have new cards, we're going to have a new census, and we're going to do renewal for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization member countries. It could be expanded thereof. The DRT explained now. We're going to take all the public and the private debt. My 10,000, your 10,000, Canada coast to coast. We're going to add it up, all the public and the private debt of Canada coast to coast, ocean to ocean. We're going to convert it into US dollars. We're going to add it with all the public-private debt of Canada and all the other debt that exists and all the money in circulation. And all that money, we're going to create a new central bank, because my DRT theory includes monetary integration theory, which is the financial theory which was implemented in the European Union back in the 90s. Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, and other countries destroyed the national central banks. They created a common year. So we're going to create the imperial central bank. We're going to issue the UE, U.Universal E.Exchange U.UE, U.Universal E.Exchange U.UE, the UE, U.Universal E.Exchange U.UE, the UE, or the imperial dollar, U.Universal E.Exchange U.UE. The universal exchange unit is going to have the value of the US dollar. We're going to set an interest rate level of 10% thereafter. With that money, we're going to rebuild the infrastructure, mass finance, building 44 tunnels across the empire of the 63 in case of a thermonuclear war. We're going to mass finance the rebuilding of the infrastructure, the tunnels, the bridges. We're going to mass finance healthcare, mass finance tourism, mass finance fitness. My workout training program system, which I created back in 2019, which I performed myself more than 372 sessions thereof, the General War Integrated Total Body Training System, aka the Dragon Army workout. Super important, of course, to do a census, implement also the Imperial Criminal Rehabilitation Act, do some amnesty for those who have been living here for the past 7 years, 9 years, 11 years, 5 years since COVID, and 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, 10 years, 11 years. Do a little bit of amnesty, give them Novus Civis, accord them some citizenships, integrate them in our empire, and then see what we can work with the border with Mexico and NATO countries, and do, and gonna finance every season, every spring, every solstice, equinox of the spring, of the summer, of the winter, of the autumn. When you're 16 and plus, all citizens, regardless of our other considerations, are going to be credited by the Imperial Tourism Ministry, which is going to create views. We're going to mass finance 4 days, which is basically 4 nights. You lose a night after midnight, past 1 minute past midnight. When you're 16, you're going to be automatically credited 4 days to whatever age, 4 days, where you can travel with food, expenses, all expenses covered. Food, don't expect caviar and 7 bottles of wine per day, but, food, breakfast, lunch, food, housing, and transport. Food, housing, and transport across the 63. We're going to get rid of the border, fuse Canada, United States, fuse the RCMP and the FBI into the Imperial Police, Republican Police Force, the Imperial Republic's Police Forces, the IPRF, Imperial Police Republican Force of the Imperial Republic's Police Force, the IRPF, the Imperial Police Security Service, and the IPSS, the Imperial Police Security Service, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, fused the RCMP and the FBI, and the CIA with that, the Dragon Army, aka Imperial Integrated Legion as the only security service and defense coast to coast, only security service and defense coast to coast, and organize and do Dragon's Lair across every 63 new states.